Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it's time to do the playoff power rankings for the 2023 USFL season. Playoffs are upon us. We know the four teams that are in it, and, well, a lot to talk about, one division being far superior to the other one. What do I have to say about that? So, without further ado, let's just get started with the rankings. Coming in number 8 is the New Jersey Generals. Honestly, I don't think this should be a shock. The team went into Week 10 with all the momentum in the world from their incredible game in Week 9, and they ended up just doing nothing. It basically proves what I said last week, which was that the Generals might have just laid it all on the line last week and, just given the Stars everything they had, and they did. They went up against the Maulers and they got absolutely destroyed. DeAndre Johnson had one of, if not the worst game at quarterback in the entire league this year. 12 for 27. That's a 44 completion percentage. 137 yards. This is a dude that was consistently having like 7, 8, 9 yards per passing games. This time he had a 5. And he had 2 picks to 0 touchdowns for an unbelievably terrible 29.4 passer rating. And in the game, the team had 3 turnovers to the Maulers 1. And they got beat by the Maulers by nearly 10 minutes in time possession. And that's despite the fact that again they beat him yardage wise in yards per play and all that, and the Maulers beat him with 2 less drives. The Maulers just outplayed him. Why'd the Generals end up going this low though? I mean, they were great at rushing yards per game, but across the whole year, that was really the only stat they were great at. Their defense wasn't what it was last year. Their passing game wasn't what it was last year, and their turnover differential -4 in the turnover differential was tied for least in the league. So they turned the ball over too much. They kept on doing really bad things across the year. Trey Williams didn't get a lot of touches, and then the last week of the season after he loses goes on Twitter to blast his coaching staff. Essentially, the Generals just weren't it this year. Mike Riley, I think, lost a lot of credibility as a coach. It was viewed before the season he was a guaranteed top 3 coach. Now, you make a case that he's not even top 5 coach because a couple of the guys that made the playoffs in the North really did turn some really bad ships around. So, Generals at 8, I don't think this should shock anyone. Now, coming in at number 7, this is the controversial one I would say is the Gamblers. Yeah, I'm putting the Gamblers this low. I totally understand if you don't agree with this because of the fact that, the Stars ended up finishing 4 and 6, or that, oh, but the Gamblers, I have the Gamblers at 7. Look, I think the fact is the last few weeks they really haven't looked that good, in all honesty. They had 10 minutes more time possession. They had 100 more yards in the breakers, yet they got beat by 7. Kenji Bahar had a really solid game. Mark Thompson had a great game. He's going to win OPOY. But in the end, the team had the second worst defense in the league, tied for worst turnover differential. And what they were good at was stuff that ended up not really mattering. You see, they were great rushing yards. They were second in the league at that. And they ended up finishing second and third down percentage, which sounds good. But you realize that back in like week 5, they were at like 55%. That number just kept going down, and it literally has not gone up ever since it started going down. It's like Ezekiel Elliott's career. It just keeps going down and down and down. And that's the biggest reason I have the Stars above him. I think that while the Stars did have they kind of, they really blew the game against the Panthers. I look at what the Stars have done the last few weeks, and I say, if these two teams played again today, I think the Stars would beat them. It's just that Bahar has been way too inconsistent, and even when he's good, he's not really that great. He's just a good quarterback. Whereas Cookus, when he's on, is the best quarterback in spring football with, Magoo and all that. So I have the Gamblers at 7. Definitely a really big hot take, but I do. They fell off a lot in a lot of stats, so I'm putting them here. The number 6 is the Stars. The Stars come in number 6 because, while they lost, they blew a 14-point lead, and they just finished really weird in a lot of stats. Look, they had 13 more minutes time possession than the Panthers. They had 130 more yards, 0.6 more yards per play. Ended up losing because the Panthers just got it done in the end. They scored 9 points in the third quarter, 8 in the fourth quarter, whereas the Stars got shut out. The Stars overall finished with the worst rushing game in the league, the worst defense in the league, and then they ended up getting sacked more than basically every other team but the Maulers. But like I said, I have them above the Gamblers because a lot of these stats that are really bad were mainly due to how they were in the first 6 weeks of the season, when they were, still either barely winning or, having a lot of things happen to them. Because their rushing stats did improve a lot during the end of the year. It just ended up not really mattering. The team dealt with a lot of injuries, excuses that the Gamblers and Generals can't make, the Stars could make. Channing Stribling and Matt Colburn were both out for significant weeks, and that really hurt them. But in the end, I think that these three bottom teams are clearly the three bottom teams in the league. I really don't buy into the fact that the whole South is better than the whole North because of the record, because at the end of the day, I really do think the Gamblers especially just weren't it. But as for the Stars as well, the Stars ended up finishing the second worst point differential while scoring the fourth most points. And that's the big thing. Their defense without Stribling just couldn't get the turnovers and stops it used to. So their offense was still very solid, all things considered, despite the fact that for literally half the year had no run game. They never really had an O-line. They still put up the numbers they did on offense. It's just that their defense really did let them down. So I have the Stars at 6. Coming in at number 5 is going to be the Michigan Panthers. Panthers are really here just because they beat the Stars and that they objectively, statistically, everything, this team is the worst team in the league. I'm not even kidding. Because they're outside of the top 3 in every major stat, even the ones I usually don't show, like returning and all that, they're still outside the top 3 in all of them. And they finished with, the second worst running game in the league. But they made the playoffs. They won the games that really mattered. Last year, they, were terrible, but in the last game of the year, they looked incredible to win the number 1 overall pick. And this year was very similar to that. They got to the final game, and in that second half, Mike Nolan got his guys to, get ready and go win a game to make the playoffs. E.J. Perry's their new quarterback. I think it's a huge, bold decision that I think is going to be really good for them. Because a lot of the reason they're outside a lot of those top categories, I would say, is because of Josh Love. He threw so many interceptions or fumbled the ball so much. It hurt the defense. It hurt everybody. And I don't have him show, but naturally, the Panthers defense has a couple insane players. Frank Gidna and Breland Speaks, you can make a very good case for the 2 best defenders in the league. Though Speaks maybe is, 4th or 5th. But Gidna is the best defender in the league, and outside of Magoo might be the best player in the league for this year. Now, while yes, the team did finish last in both point differential and points scored, finishing below Pittsburgh in points scored and below Philly and New Jersey in point differential, I think the team deserves to be at 5 just for the sole reason that they did get the W that mattered. And it's really hard because, again, this whole bottom 4 is really tough to put where to put them. I think it's very obvious which 4 teams are the bottom 4. It's just, you can really make a case that the Panthers are really low, but I think that the Stars, it's like with the Generals earlier in the season. You give a team 1 pass for a game, but you don't give them 2. I gave the Stars a pass last week for saying that, hey, the Generals just left it all out there. The Stars were a better team for the most part. This week, nah. You lost, you get moved down. Panthers move above you. Panthers in the playoffs at 5. Now, coming in at number 4 is going to be the Pittsburgh Maulers. The Maulers, man, they just look good again. Look, they pwned the Generals. Troy Williams had another really solid game, 17-25, 1 TD, no picks, 97.8 passer rating. Then running the ball, again, a lot to be desired. I really don't think they've had a single game where both their running backs had a great game. It's usually either Madre has a good game or Garrett has a good game. Groshek ended up having a good game this time, 4.4 yards per carry for 53 yards, whereas London, get rid of his one long he had of 10 yards, and you've got 8 attempts for 6 yards. Yikes. So, that's the big question. And the thing about this team is that they're very yin and yang in a lot of ways. Look, in some ways they're terrible, right? They're the worst in passing yards per game. They're the worst in third down percentage. They're the worst in third down percentage or something like that. And then they're the worst team in yards per game. Yet they're the second best team in points allowed, and they're the best team in turnover differential, and they're the best by 5. We're talking about the Maulers. They're the most protective team of the ball by a mile, and that's a big reason why naturally the team made the playoffs, because they didn't turn the ball over, giving the other team extra chances to score, so their defense didn't have to do extra jobs, and they made the playoffs. I think 4 is a solid spot for them. I do think that the team at 3 would beat them in a game against each other, but I think the Maulers are a very solid team. I think they deserve their spot, so Maulers end the regular season at 4. Coming in number 3, Memphis Showboats. The highest team that did not make the playoffs. I think that they are a lot better than the Gamblers. I really do. Against the Stallions, they gave them a really good shot. They made up for their 40-2 drafting that they had early in the season. They gave it all out there, but they lost. Look, they should have won, turnover differential. They were better, but Cole Kelly had another okay-ish game. But at the end of the day, the reason this team lost is their third down percentage. and the yards per game just weren't up there for the season. They had a lot of weeks where the running game had a lot to be desired, and Cole Kelly literally never was that good or that bad. He never had like a game that was horrid or a game that was great. He was always just okay-ish. And they were able to ride that and a very underrated defense to making a near playoff run. The team had a really great win streak. They had like the 5-game win streak in the middle of the year. I think the Showboats, I really do think they are deserving of this third spot. I think that all things considered, their team it was the most balanced team in the league, I would say. There really wasn't a single point on the team that was super great or super bad. It was all just there, kind of. Just, a very solid team that gets the job done. So I have them at 3. Very solid team. Shame they missed the playoffs, but it is what it is. Then, of course, coming in at number 2 is going to be the New Orleans Breakers. I mean, come on. Breakers, they definitely deserve this spot. If it wasn't for the fact that you have, the Stallions that are just so dominant, the Breakers would be the number 1 team. Look, the Breakers finished the year second in points scored and point differential, only behind the Stallions. And actually, they're behind them by like 50 and 40, respectively. But they're just so much higher, especially in point differential, than the other team, as them and the Stallions are the only teams with a positive point differential, and they were by plus 53. So it's not too surprising this team is number 2. I mean, I'll show you the image I showed in the Breakers video. They have the number 1 rusher. Granted, West Hills has looked really bad the last few weeks. MBT is the leader in passing. Very solid quarterback. Had a couple bad weeks, but overall was solid. And look, they're number 2 in a lot of stats that matter. Turnover differential, yards per game, and they're first in points allowed and first in passing yards game. This team is a really solid team. They're much better than the last year's Breakers team because last year's Breaker team had way too many turnovers to what they scored on the ground and through the air. Granted, last year, their running game was a lot more, reliable than West Hills has been. But overall, the Breakers at 2. I think this isn't really a shock to anyone. This team is just dominance in a lot of ways because they just, they keep on doing what they've been doing. Even though it's not working, they still are giving West Hills a lot of carries. They're still throwing a ton of passes. And it doesn't matter really if they win or lose. They're going to keep doing it. They're going to live and die by it. So we'll see. And number 1 is the Birmingham Stallions. Look, nothing really changed from last week. Look, they're number 1, like I said, by a ton in point differential and points scored. Like, you look at points scored and you see, okay, number 2 to number 8 is within, just barely 60 points. And then you get to number 1 who's 50 points clear of the second place. And then you go to point differential. Okay, -1 is third place to -44. That's within 43 points. Wow, the Breakers are at 53. That's it. Plus 91. It's just insane. And look, I didn't even bother making the image. Look, they're literally top 3 in every single stat, pretty much. Magoo's going to win MVP. Holtz might win Coach of the Year. I don't think he should, but maybe he gets it. I don't think he should, but we'll see. But, I mean, dude, the team is just so dominant. Look, they lost who a lot of people said was their best quarterback and best running back in Jay Mara and Bo Scarborough in week 1. And now they look really great. Their running game is better than it was last year for the most part. Even though they don't have the dominance of Scarborough because he had a couple of really great games, it just overall it seems more consistent. And Magoo is he's been on another level. So, honestly, I'm not too shocked. The Stallions being number 1. They are the favorite to win the title, so we'll see. Overall, this has been Zomfox. If you enjoyed the content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. As you've seen, we've had a ton of videos this week, and we still have a lot of videos coming out this week, so it means a lot to subscribe to the channel. And as always, have a great night.